In 1940, a 9-year-old in Iowa could climb onto a 2-ton tractor, fire it up, and drive it across the back 40 before breakfast. Nobody blinked. Today, that same act would bring a federal investigator to the front door. But here's the twist. Number 7 on this list was so ordinary that whole generations did it barehanded, and we now know it was poisoning them slowly. And number 1 still kills more young people on American farms than almost anything else, which is exactly why the law finally stepped in. These 25 chores built the toughest generation this country ever produced. They also broke bones, took fingers, and sometimes took lives. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because some of these will make you wonder how any farm kid survived childhood at all. Let us count down the 25 chores that vanished when the law caught up. Number 25, hauling water from the well. Before pressure tanks and electric pumps reached the countryside, the first chore of the day belonged to the youngest pair of hands strong enough to grip a bucket handle. A child of 7 or 8 would shuffle to the well in the gray light, drop the bucket on its rope, and haul up gallon after gallon for the kitchen, the wash basin, and the stock trough. A single full bucket weighed close to 40 pounds, and the family needed dozens before the morning was out. Backs bent, ropes burned through small palms, and more than one child went over the lip of an open well in the dark. The Department of Labor today flags repetitive heavy lifting and unguarded well openings as hazards no miner should be near. Back then, it was simply Tuesday. The water had to come up, and the smallest hands came first. Number 24, the cream separator and the butter churn. After the milking came the separating, and that job fell to the children. A hand-crank cream separator spun at thousands of revolutions per minute, its bowl a blur of exposed steel discs, and a kid had to keep that crank turning at a steady speed for 20 minutes straight, or the cream came out wrong. Fingers got caught in the gearing. Loose sleeves got pulled in faster than anyone could react. Then came the churn. Another half an hour of cranking until the sweet smell of butter rose from the dasher. A pound of butter sold for around 30 cents in the 1930s, real money for a farm family, so the work mattered. Today, the open gears and pinch points on that equipment would never pass an OSHA inspection, and no child labor officer would let a 10-year-old anywhere near a spinning separator bowl. Number 23, hand milking the herd before dawn. The cows did not care that it was 4 in the morning or that school started at 8. A farm child as young as 6 learned to press a forehead into a warm flank, grip, and pull, draining a dozen cows by hand before the sun cleared the silo. The smell of manure and hay and steaming milk filled the dark barn. A kicked-over pail meant a whipping or a missed breakfast, and a cow that decided to kick could break a child's nose or arm in a heartbeat. There was the lifting, too. Full pails weighing 50 pounds carried across an icy yard. Modern labor law treats working with large dairy animals as hazardous for anyone under 16, and the pre-dawn hours alone would violate today's rules on school-age work. For these kids, the herd came first and always had. Number 22, gathering eggs and battling the rooster. It sounds gentle, a child with a basket walking the hen house. It was not. The rooster ruled that yard, and a big leghorn or gamecock would launch itself at a small face with spurs sharp enough to draw blood and tear an eyelid. Children went into the coop armed with a stick or a feed sack shield, dodging the bird, reaching under broody hens that pecked at their wrists, and climbing rickety ladders to nests in the rafters. The hen house air was thick with ammonia and dust that we now know it carries real respiratory danger. A fall from the nesting ladder onto a packed dirt floor could crack a skull. Eggs sold for pennies a dozen, but they were the family's grocery money, so the basket got filled no matter how many times the rooster drew blood. Number 21, pitching hay into the loft. When the hay wagon rolled up to the barn, every kid grabbed a fork. The job was to throw loose hay up into the loft, then climb up and stomp it down into the corners, packing a space 3 stories tall with nothing but a pitchfork and bare feet for traction. The dust was blinding. The forks were waist-high spears that found their way into shins and feet. And the loft itself was a death trap, an open floor above a hard barn aisle with no rail, no harness, and a hay chute a child could drop straight through. Heat in a July loft climbed past 110 degrees, and kids passed out up there. Today, working from unguarded heights and operating in a confined, dust-choked space would put this squarely on the list of tasks no miner is allowed to do for hire. Number 20, splitting firewood with an axe. By the time a boy was 8, he was expected to keep the wood box full, and that meant a full-sized felling axe swung over his own head. Winter heat and the cook stove both ran on wood, and a farm burned through cords of it. A child would set around on the chopping block, raise an axe nearly as long as he was tall, and bring it down, hoping his aim held. A glancing blow buried the blade in a shin or a foot. Numb hands in January lost their grip on the handle entirely. Then came stacking and hauling armloads through the snow. No safety glasses, no steel toes, no supervision. Today, handing a grade schooler an axe and sending him out alone would draw a child welfare visit. Back then, a full wood box was simply proof the boy was earning his keep. Number 19, the hand crank corn sheller. First pattern break. Here is where the machines start fighting back. The hand crank corn sheller looked harmless, a cast iron box with a hopper and a crank, but it ate fingers for sport. A child fed ear after ear into the spinning toothed wheel while cranking with the other hand, and the whole point was to keep the hopper full and the kernels flying. Reach in to clear a jam without stopping the crank, and the machine took whatever you offered. Farm hospitals in the Corn Belt saw a steady parade of children missing fingertips from exactly this chore. The shelled corn fed the hogs and chickens, so the work never stopped through the long winter evenings. Modern hazardous occupation rules specifically bar miners from operating power and hand-fed shelling and grinding equipment, and one look at the unguarded mechanism tells you exactly why that line got drawn. Number 18, scything the hayfield by hand. Before the horse mower reached every farm, children swung the scythe. A long, curved blade on a wooden snath kept razor sharp with a whetstone carried in a back pocket, sweeping in a rhythm across the standing grass. One slip, one root caught underfoot, and that blade came around into an ankle or a knee. Snakes hidden in the tall grass struck at bare legs. The work ran from first light until the heat of midday, swinging an edged tool heavy enough to fell a sapling, hour after hour, beside grown men who did not slow down for a tired 10-year-old. The sweet green smell of cut hay hung over fields full of kids doing work that would horrify a modern safety inspector. A sharpened blade in the hands of a child for a full day's labor is exactly the kind of task today's law was written to end. Number 17, driving the horse or mule team to plow. A team of draft horses weighed close to a ton each, and on countless farms, it was a child holding the lines. By 10 or 11, a kid was expected to harness, hitch, and drive a plow team down a furrow all day, fighting 1,000 pounds of muscle that could bolt at a snake, a clap of thunder, or nothing at all. A runaway team would drag a child across a field, tangle them in the lines, or roll the plow. Mules were worse, smart enough to test exactly how far they could push a small driver. The reins blistered young hands, and the plow handles bucked hard enough to crack ribs. Today, putting a sixth grader in sole control of a ton of spooked livestock attached to a steel blade is unthinkable. For generations, it was the only way the crop got in. Number 16. Trapping and shooting varmints. The farm declared war on anything that ate the crop or the chickens, and children were the frontline soldiers. A 9-year-old boy carried his own .22 caliber rifle out to the fields to shoot crows, woodchucks, and foxes, often before school, often alone. They set steel-leg traps along fence lines, traps strong enough to snap a small wrist, and waded into creeks to check them at dawn. There were loaded firearms, live traps, and no adult in sight. Accidents happened the way you would expect, and the local paper carried the notices. Bounties paid a few cents a tail, real pocket money for a farm kid. Today, no employer could legally hand a child a rifle and send him out to hunt, and most states bar minors from unsupervised firearm use entirely. On the old farm, it was just another item on the morning chore list. Number 15. Detasseling corn in the July heat. When hybrid seed corn took over the Midwest, the industry needed armies of small, fast hands, and it hired children by the busload. Kids as young as 10 walked the rows for 10-hour days, reaching up to rip the tassel from the top of every corn plant so the rows would cross-pollinate. The corn leaves were like serrated paper, slicing forearms and faces into a crosshatch of cuts. The heat in a windless cornfield climbed past 100 degrees, with no shade for a mile and water hours away. Heat stroke dropped children in the rows. The pay was a few dollars a day. Detasseling crews of miners still exist in a tightly regulated form, but the conditions those early kids worked, the hours, the heat, the total lack of water and breaks would shut a modern operation down overnight. Number 14. Picking cotton and topping tobacco. Across the South, the harvest belonged to children. In the cotton fields, kids dragged a long canvas sack down endless rows, fingers bleeding from the sharp, dried bolls, bent double under a sun that did not quit. In the tobacco fields, they topped and suckered plants, their skin absorbing so much nicotine from the wet leaves that they came home dizzy and vomiting, a sickness now named green tobacco sickness. School let out for the harvest because everyone knew the children would be in the fields anyway. They worked sunup to sundown for pennies a pound. Second pattern break, and here is the uncomfortable part. Some of this still technically happens in American agriculture under exemptions written decades ago, which is exactly why advocates keep fighting to close the loopholes that let children do work no factory would ever be allowed to assign them. Number 13. Feeding the threshing machine. Before the combine, the threshing machine was the beating heart of harvest, a roaring, belt-driven monster that separated grain from straw, and children worked right in its jaws. A kid's job was to cut the twine on the bundles and feed them head first into the spinning cylinder, fast enough to keep the machine fed, close enough that a slipped grip pulled an arm in after the wheat. The flat leather drive belt ran from a steam engine 50 feet away, and that belt alone killed and maimed farmhands of every age. Dust and chaff filled the lungs. The noise drowned out any cry for help. Threshing was the most dangerous day of the farm year, and children stood in the worst spot. operating and feeding power-driven harvesting machinery is now flatly prohibited for minors, a rule written in the blood of the kids who fed the thresher. Number 12. Operating the hay baler. When the baler arrived, it was hailed as a miracle, and it promptly began taking limbs. The machine swept hay into a chamber where a steel plunger slammed forward dozens of times a minute with enough force to crush bone, and children rode the baler to tie off the bales and clear the jams. Clearing a jam meant reaching toward that plunger, and a baler does not wait. Farm injury records from the mid-century are full of teenagers who lost a hand or an arm to exactly this reach. The pickup teeth at the front grabbed anything that came near, including the kids walking alongside. A square baler is precisely the kind of power machinery the agricultural hazardous occupations orders bar anyone under 16 from running. For decades, though, the kid riding the baler was just how the hay got put up. Number 11. Driving the grain truck to the elevator. Third pattern break, and this one will sound made up. At harvest, when there was more grain than the family could haul, the children drove the trucks. A 12-year-old who could barely see over the wheel would climb into a loaded grain truck, pull onto a public county road, and drive miles to the elevator and back, then do it again until dark. No license, no permit, no driver's education, sometimes blocks behind another kid doing the same thing. They drove tractors down the center line of state highways, pulling wagons twice their length. Everyone in the county knew the harvest meant child-driven trucks on the roads, and everyone just made room. Today, this breaks not one but a stack of laws, from licensing to child labor to motor vehicle operation by minors. Back then, it was simply how a family got the crop to market before the weather turned. Number 10. Driving the tractor solo at age 8. The tractor changed everything on the farm, and the moment a child was big enough to reach the pedals, that child was driving it. 8-year-olds disked fields, raked hay, and pulled wagons alone on machines with no roll bar, no seatbelt, and a high center of gravity that flipped backward in an instant on a hill or a ditch bank. The tractor rollover was, and remains, the single deadliest event in American agriculture, and for generations the operator was often a small child. A power takeoff shaft spun inches away, ready to catch a sleeve or a pant leg, and wind a body around it in under a second. Federal law now bars minors under 16 from operating tractors over 20 horsepower for hire. The farm kid driving the big tractor alone at 8 is the very image those rules were meant to retire. Number 9. Riding on the tractor fender or drawbar. If a child was not driving the tractor, the child was riding it, perched on a fender, standing on the drawbar, or sitting in a parent's lap with hands on the wheel. There was nothing to hold and nothing to stop a fall straight down into the path of the implement being towed behind. The extra rider death is one of the most documented tragedies in farm safety research. A child who slipped off and went under the wheels or the mower in the time it took a parent to turn around. It happened in the friendliest, most ordinary moment of the day, a ride out to the field. Every safety campaign now preaches a single hard rule: no extra riders, ever. For most of the 20th century, though, the tractor fender was the best seat on the farm, and every kid wanted it. Number 8. Climbing the windmill to grease it. The windmill pumped the water that kept the stock alive, and when it squealed, somebody had to climb up and grease the gears. That somebody was usually the lightest, most fearless kid on the place. Up the open steel tower they went, 30, 40, 50 feet. No harness, no rope, no rail, with a can of grease in one hand and the wind trying to peel them off the rungs. At the top, they leaned out over nothing to reach the gearbox while the great blades turned beside their heads. A slip meant a fall onto hard ground or fence wire. Working from heights above 20 feet is now squarely prohibited for miners in agriculture, and the image of a 10-year-old free climbing a windmill in a stiff prairie wind explains the rule better than any statute could. Number 7. Mixing and spraying pesticides barehanded. Here is the one I warned you about in the intro. For decades, children mixed and applied the most toxic chemicals on the farm with no protection at all. They walked the rows with hand sprayers full of lead arsenate, dusted the crops with DDT, and waded through orchards in a fog of compounds we have since banned outright. No gloves, no mask, no respirator. The spray soaked into their clothes and skin all day. Kids dipped sheep in arsenic baths and breathed the fumes from grain treated with mercury. The damage was invisible and slow, the kind that shows up as illness decades later. Today, the law specifically forbids miners from handling agricultural chemicals rated in the most toxic categories, full stop. The generation that sprayed those fields barehanded paid a price the records are still adding up, a quiet cost behind the nostalgia. Number 6. Branding and dehorning cattle. Roundup turned the whole family into a crew, and the children worked the chute. They wrestled calves, pressed glowing irons against hide until the smoke rose, and held animals still for dehorning, a job done with saws and gouges and sheer force. A panicked calf weighs more than a child and kicks like a sledgehammer. Cracked ribs, broken noses, and crushed fingers were the ordinary wages of branding day. The hot irons themselves left their own scars on careless young hands. It was loud, chaotic, and dangerous in a dozen ways at once, with kids in the middle of every bit of it. Modern rules treat working with cattle in confined handling areas as hazardous for miners, and for good reason. On the old ranch, though, branding day was a rite of passage, and a child too small to rope was still expected to hold on tight. Number 5. Castrating the livestock. Fourth pattern break, and this is the chore nobody likes to talk about. Every spring, the young male animals had to be cut, and on most farms the children helped. They held the lambs and pigs and calves down, and often did the cutting themselves once they were judged old enough to be trusted with the knife. The work was bloody and fast, and done in the dirt of the pen, with a kicking animal and a sharp blade in close quarters. The risk of a deep cut to the child, of infection, of a kick to the head from a struggling animal was constant. It was simply part of raising stock, taught the way everything was taught on the farm by doing it. Today, assigning that task to a miner would cross both safety and child welfare lines without hesitation. For farm kids of the past, it was just another spring morning's work. Number 4, handling the breeding bull. Of all the animals on the farm, the breeding bull was the one that killed grown men, and yet children were sent to feed it, lead it, and move it between pastures. A dairy or beef bull can top 1 ton and turn from calm to deadly in a single second, pinning a person against a fence and crushing the life out of them. Farm fatality records are grim with the names of people gored or trampled by a bull, and a child stood no chance at all. Kids led these animals by a ring through the nose, trusting a thin rope against a wall of muscle and bad temper. The Agricultural Hazardous Occupations Orders single out working with breeding bulls, boars, and sows with newborns as off-limits for anyone under 16. The farm child who fed the bull every evening was gambling, and most days the bull simply chose not to collect. Number 3, filling the silo. The upright silo fed the herd through winter, and filling it was one of the deadliest jobs on the place. Children climbed inside to spread and pack the chopped silage as the blower shot it up 40 feet and rained it down. What no one understood for years was the gas. Fermenting silage gives off nitrogen dioxide, a heavy, invisible, poisonous gas that pools at the surface and can kill in minutes, a danger that earned its own grim name, silo filler's disease. Kids climbed down into that and never knew the air itself could stop their lungs. The fall risk alone into a deep round pit with a running blower was bad enough. Today, confined space entry like this is one of the most tightly controlled tasks in all of industry, and miners are barred from it outright. The silo took its victims quietly, and the families rarely knew why until far too late. Number 2, hog butchering day. When the weather turned cold, the whole farm gathered for butchering, and the children were in it from the first hour to the last. They tended the fires under scalding kettles of water, hot enough to take the skin off a careless arm, hauled buckets of that boiling water across a crowded yard, and worked alongside the adults with knives at every station. The animals were large, and the work was fast and slick, with sharp blades, heavy carcasses, and scalding water, all moving at once in a tight space full of people. A slip, a dropped knife, an overturned kettle, the chances for serious injury were everywhere. It was also, for most farm families, one of the most important days of the year, the difference between a winter with meat and a winter without. Today, the combination of children, edged tools, and boiling water at an industrial pace would never pass a single safety standard. Then, it was a community celebration, and every kid had a job. Number 1, working inside the grain bin. And the most dangerous chore of all, the one the intro promised, the one that still kills young people on American farms today. When grain bridged or crusted or jammed the auger, somebody small and light was sent inside to break it loose, and that someone was the children. The traps, invisible and merciless. Flowing grain behaves like quicksand. A person standing on it can be sucked under in seconds, and once the grain is past the waist, no human strength on earth can pull them free. A child can vanish beneath the surface before anyone outside even hears a shout, suffocating in the dark under tons of corn. This is not history. Grain entrapment deaths still happen every single year, and the victims are heartbreakingly often the youngest workers. Federal law absolutely prohibits minors under 16 from working inside grain storage structures, no exceptions, no family loophole for the deadliest spots. It is the clearest line the law draws, and it was drawn because for generations, the smallest hands were sent into the most lethal place on the farm, and far too many never climbed back out. So there they are, 25 chores that built a generation and would land a modern farm in front of a federal judge. Some, like hauling water or churning butter, sound almost quaint until you remember the open wells and spinning gears. Others, like the grain bin and the silo, still kill kids today, which is exactly why the law finally said enough. Here is my question for you. Which of these did your family actually do, and which one shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments, because somebody out there grew up driving that grain truck at 12 and is shaking their head right now. They knew. Now you know, too.